That night, I didn't reach for a weapon, I pressed play. Each blow he landed echoed like evidence, while the red camera lights blinked like a verdict waiting to be signed. He thought I was alone, phone dead, Wi-Fi cut, but he didn't know the entire apartment complex was watching live through the emergency surveillance system I'd just installed. 6 years ago, I escaped that house. Tonight, I came back to end it with the truth. My name is Harper Quinn, and I once believed in the kind of safety that comes from a father's strong hands teaching you to read star maps by campfire light. I was 11 when Dad died pancreatic cancer, 3 months from diagnosis to funeral, and 13 when Wade Riker knocked on our door in Cedar Ridge, Colorado, toolbox in hand, offering to fix our sagging roof for half the going rate. Mom, Elaine Quinn, had been a librarian before grief turned her into something translucent, like tissue paper held to window light. She floated through our house, touching Dad's things, his camping gear, his astronomy books, his coffee mug still sitting by the sink. When Wade showed up, she barely looked at him, just nodded at whatever price he quoted. He worked slowly, deliberately, stretching a 2-day job into 2 weeks. Each evening, he'd knock 3 soft taps that would become my future nightmare rhythm and stand in our doorway with groceries. "Noticed you hadn't been to the store?" he'd say, holding up milk, bread, ground beef. "Let me carry the heavy parts for a while." Mom smiled for the first time in months. I wanted to feel grateful, but something about how he watched her, cataloging her movements like inventory, made my stomach tight. The campfire lessons with Dad felt like another lifetime those nights when he'd point to Polaris and say, "If you're ever lost, find the North Star. It never lies." So, Wade proposed 6 months later in our kitchen, under the yellow overhead light that made everyone look sick. The ring was modest. The speech practiced, "Elaine, you and Harper deserve stability. Let me be your foundation." Mom said yes in a voice so small I barely heard it. He slipped a silver chain around my neck right after, "For my new daughter," he said, his thumb pressing the pendant against my throat. "As long as you know your place, we'll get along perfect." The changes came like a tide, inch by inch, until you're drowning. First, the open bedroom doors. "Privacy breeds secrets," Wade said. Then the scheduled phone checks, the spending logs, the casual questions that weren't questions. "Where were you between 3:15 and 4:30? The school bus dropped you at 3:10. Mom's silence became law. When I showed her my first poetry prize at 15, she started to smile until Wade's voice cut through. "Writing stories, that's not a skill that pays bills." She turned away, busying herself with dishes that were already clean. I learned that her survival depended on invisibility, on becoming furniture he could walk past without seeing. But I was 17 when I first pushed back. I wanted an after-school job at the coffee shop, normal teenage stuff. "Every dollar goes to the household," Wade said, confiscating my first paycheck. "Family contribution." When I protested, he grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to bruise, just firm enough to remind me of the inventory he kept of our movements, our words, our breath. The night before my 18th birthday, he left an envelope on my pillow. Inside a community college application, already filled out, major office administration. "A practical future," the note said. Mom stood in my doorway that night, rain drumming the windows, and whispered 8 words that became my escape plan. "You're stronger than me. Don't let him break you." So, I left Cedar Ridge on a Greyhound bus 3 weeks after graduation. Dad's star chart journal, the only thing worth taking. Wade had smiled when I announced I was leaving, the satisfied smile of a chess player whose opponent just moved exactly where expected. "The world's small. Harper," he said. "Smaller than you think." He was right about that, but he was wrong about everything else. The slide into control happened so gradually that looking back, I can map it like a disease progression, each symptom overlooked until the body's too sick to fight. Wade never hit us during those early years. He didn't need to. He had perfected a subtler violence, the timer he'd set when I went to Ashley's house. 45 minutes. Harper. The drive is 12 minutes each way. The receipts he'd check against bank statements, circling discrepancies in red ink like a teacher grading failure. When I was 16 and bought a candy bar without listing it in the spending log, he made me stand in the kitchen while he called it financial betrayal, his voice so calm it felt like drowning in still water. My 17th year, I won the district writing competition a story about a girl who builds wings from newspaper and flies away. The trophy sat on the kitchen counter for exactly 1 hour before Wade moved it to the garage. "Filling your head with fantasies," he said at dinner, cutting his steak with precision. "You know what storytellers become waitresses with delusions." Mom pushed peas around her plate, her silence so complete it had weight. That's when I understood he wasn't trying to control us. He was erasing us, pixel by pixel, until we existed only as extensions of his will. The coffee shop job had been my first real rebellion. $3.50 an hour plus tips, and I'd hidden the application until the manager called to confirm my start date. Wade's face when he answered that call, not angry, just coldly amused, like watching a mouse run toward a trap. He let me work exactly 2 weeks, long enough to earn $327. Then he appeared at the register during my shift. Hand extended. "Family contribution," he said, loud enough for customers to hear, making it sound reasonable, generous even. My manager looked away. Everyone always looked away, but it was my 18th birthday that showed me the exact shape of my cage. The community college application was just part of it. He'd also arranged an internship at his friend's accounting firm. "You'll start Monday after graduation," and opened a joint bank account in my name that required both signatures for withdrawals. "For your protection," he explained. "Young people make impulsive decisions." I remember staring at those forms, seeing my future contracted to a single paragraph work for Wade's friends, deposit checks Wade could monitor, marry someone Wade approved of, raise children Wade would eventually control, a recursive loop of surrender, generation after generation. Mom found me crying in the bathroom that night, the forms torn into confetti in the sink. The rain outside sounded like static, like white noise, like the space between radio stations. She knelt beside me. I hadn't seen her kneel since Dad's funeral, and pressed her face against my shoulder. Her body felt hollow, bird-boned, like Wade had been siphoning her substance for years. "You're stronger than me," she whispered, and I could smell the wine she'd been hiding in the laundry room. "Don't let him break you." "Come with me," I begged. She pulled back, and in the bathroom's harsh light, I saw the truth she'd already been broken. Probably that first night he'd brought groceries, when loneliness made her mistake possession for care. The best she could do now was make sure I didn't share her fate. "He watches the bank accounts," she said, "the credit cards, the phone bills, but he doesn't know about the emergency cash in your father's camping gear. Take it and run." 3 weeks later, I stood at the Greyhound station at 5:45 in the morning, $200 in Dad's old wallet and a duffel bag of clothes. Wade had left for a construction site at 5:30, his routine as predictable as a metronome. Mom stood at the kitchen window, not waving, that would be too obvious, just standing witness. The bus pulled away at 6:10 sharp, and I watched Cedar Ridge shrink to nothing, Wade's last words echoing, "The world's small, Harper, smaller than you think." He meant it as a threat. I took it as a promise. If the world was small, that meant I could learn every inch of it. I could become someone who knew how to watch the watchers. The Greyhound took me to Denver, where nobody knew my name and the mountains looked different from the eastern side. I rented a room in a house with 5 other people, all of us running from something, none of us asking questions. My roommate worked nights at a hospital and day slept with earplugs. We communicated through Post-it notes on the refrigerator. It was perfect. Dad's star chart journal became my anchor. Each night, I'd trace the constellations he'd drawn, remembering his voice. "Knowledge is power, Harper. Learn everything you can." So I did. I took a certification course in network security at the community college, not the one Wade had chosen, but one 40 miles away where his influence couldn't reach. The instructor, an ex-military tech specialist, noticed my obsession with surveillance systems. "You planning to catch bad guys?" he asked once, watching me stay after class to study camera angles and blind spots. "Something like that," I said. "North River Secure Systems hired me as an entry-level installer. The pay was decent, but the education was priceless. I learned how cameras could see in the dark, how to hide power sources, how to build redundant networks that kept recording even when main systems failed. I learned that people felt safe when they saw cameras, but the real power was in the ones they couldn't see. My supervisor, Marcus, taught me about emergency broadcast protocols, how certain triggers could push a feed to multiple screens simultaneously. "Life and death stuff," he said, showing me the panic button integration. "When seconds count, you want every eye on the situation." I became an expert in invisible architecture backup routers hidden in ventilation systems, pinhole lenses that looked like smoke detector lights, battery packs that could run for 72 hours off-grid. My coworkers called me paranoid. I called it prepared. The calls home came every Sunday at 2 in the afternoon, Wade's schedule, Wade's rules. Mom would recite her lines. "Everything's fine. The garden's growing. Wade's been working on the basement." Her voice was monotone, like someone reading a hostage statement. In the background, I could always hear his footsteps, pacing, monitoring. "I miss you," she'd sometimes whisper when the footsteps moved away. "I'm working on something," I'd promise, though I didn't know what yet. The Christmas photo arrived in my 3rd year away. Mom stood by their tree, Wade's arm around her shoulders, his hand gripping just a little too tight. She'd tried to cover the bruise on her temple with makeup and hair, but I knew her face like my own reflection. The bruise was fresh, maybe 2 days old, that particular purple-green that comes before yellow. I called immediately. "Mom, your face." I tripped on the stairs. She cut me off. "Clumsy. You know me." Wade's voice boomed in the background. "Tell her about the new security system." My blood went cold. Security system. "Oh yes," Mom said, that rehearsed quality returning. "Wade installed cameras and new locks. He says it's safer. No one can get in or out without him knowing." Or, "out." The words hung between us. That night, I sat in my Denver apartment, staring at the photo. The bruise was positioned exactly where someone's hand would connect if they grabbed her face and shoved it against something hard. I'd installed enough security systems to know Wade wasn't keeping danger out. He was keeping Mom in. I opened Dad's journal to the page about Polaris, the North Star that never lies, that always points home. But sometimes, I realized, home isn't where you run to. Sometimes it's where you have to return to, armed with knowledge the enemy doesn't expect you to have. At work the next day, I started building something in my spare time. Not a plan yet, just capabilities. A portable recording system that could run independently. Upload protocols that could push to cloud storage even through restricted networks. Marcus thought I was developing a new product for the company. "This is impressive," he said, watching me test the emergency broadcast feature. "Completely autonomous." "What triggers it?" "Impact sounds," I said. "Voices in distress. Certain keywords. When it hears enough triggers, it starts streaming everywhere, every linked device, every paired screen. No way to stop it once it starts." "Like a digital scream," he said. Exactly like that. The calls home got worse. Mom's silences grew longer. Sometimes I heard her crying, muffled like she was hiding in the bathroom. Wade's voice got louder, more present, like he was standing directly over her shoulder. "Your mother's tired," he'd say, taking the phone. "Maybe you should visit. Been too long." It had been 4 years, 11 months, and 6 days. I wasn't ready yet, but I was getting close. I requested 2 weeks off from North River, telling Marcus I needed to handle family matters. He didn't ask questions by then. He'd seen enough of my late-night system tests to know something was weighing on me. I packed my equipment carefully: 3 pinhole cameras, 2 backup routers, a portable battery pack, and a burner phone I'd programmed with hotline numbers. Tools of my trade. But this wasn't a job. This was reconnaissance. The drive to Cedar Ridge took 8 hours. I'd rented a car under my company account legitimate paperwork. Nothing Wade could trace back as suspicious. As I passed the city limit sign, my hands shook on the steering wheel. The town looked smaller than my memory, like someone had compressed it, squeezed out all the air. I knocked on their door at 6:15 in the evening, knowing Wade would be home, wanting him to see me first. He opened the door wearing the same style of work clothes, the same brand of boots, like time had fossilized around him. "Harper," he said, not surprised. "Your mother will be pleased." He stepped aside, not back, but aside, making me brush past him to enter, a dominance move so small most people wouldn't notice. But I'd spent 5 years studying predator behavior through security footage. I noticed everything. Mom stood in the kitchen doorway, thinner than the Christmas photo, wearing a turtleneck in July. "Harper," she breathed, moving toward me, then stopping when Wade cleared his throat. "Dinner's at 7, he said. "Harper can help you finish cooking." The house smelled like industrial cleaner and something else fierce wet. Maybe, or just the staleness that comes when windows never open. Wade had indeed installed security cameras in every corner, keypads on doors, bars on the basement windows. "Can't be too careful," he said, watching me notice them. "Lot of crime these days." In the kitchen, I slipped the shelter lantern house card into Mom's apron pocket while pretending to hug her. She stiffened, then relaxed, her hand briefly covering mine. When Wade called for beer, I watched her palm the card into her sleeve. The burner phone was harder. I had to wait until Wade went to the bathroom, then pressed it into her hand along with a note. "Hide this, emergency only, already programmed." She nodded once, slipping it into the flour canister, a place Wade would never look, too domestic for his attention. Dinner was a performance. Wade carved the roast, asking about my little job with computers, making it sound like I played with toys for a living. I answered carefully, downplaying everything, letting him feel superior. But when he started his second beer, I took my shot. "Mom, what happened to your face?" "There's still discoloration." The table went silent. Wade set down his beer bottle slowly, deliberately. "Your mother's getting clumsy in her old age," he said, eyes locked on mine. "She's 47, I said. His smile dropped like a mask hitting the floor. "You always did have a mouth on you." "Just concerned," I said, matching his stare. "Families look out for each other." "Right." He stood, the chair scraping against tile. Mom flinched. "Harper's probably tired from her drive," he said. "We should all turn in early." It wasn't a suggestion. That night, in my childhood room, now Wade's office, my bed replaced with his desk, I mapped the house in my notebook. Camera positions 8 visible, likely 2 hidden. Motion sensors on first-floor windows. The router in the basement, password protected but running on WPA2 crackable with the right tools. The backdoor deadbolt was new, but the frame was original wood, weak at the joints. His truck in the driveway every Friday night when he drank at Murphy's Bar until exactly midnight 30. I stayed 3 days, watching his patterns. He left for work at 6:30 sharp, returned at 5:45, showered at 6, dinner at 7, TV from 8 to 10, bed at 10:30. Even his weekend routine was rigid grocery store Saturday morning, hardware store Saturday afternoon, church Sunday performance Christianity, sitting in the front row so everyone could see him. The critical detail came Friday night. He took his keys, wallet, and phone to Murphy's, but left his work badge on the dresser. The badge that opened his office downtown, where he kept his private files. Mom mentioned them once, quickly, before changing the subject. Files meant leverage. Leverage meant evidence. Sunday morning, my last day. I made breakfast while they dressed for church. Wade watched me from the doorway, suspicious of the domestic gesture. "You coming with us?" he asked. "I don't perform faith," I said, flipping pancakes. His jaw tightened. "Your mother likes it when—" "My mother likes a lot of things she can't have." I interrupted. The silence stretched between us like a wire about to snap. Then he laughed short, harsh, like a bark. "World's small, Harper. You remember that when you're back in your big city, playing with your computers. Real small." After they left, I had 90 minutes. I documented everything: the camera models, the sensor types, the router configuration. But most importantly, I found his pattern's weakness: the 15-minute window between when he got home from Murphy's drunk on Fridays and when he actually locked the doors. 15 minutes of vulnerability in a man who mistook control for strength. I left that afternoon, hugging Mom goodbye while Wade supervised from the porch. "I love you," she whispered. "I know," I said. "Be ready." I wasn't returning as the scared 18-year-old who'd fled on a Greyhound. I was coming back as an engineer. And engineers don't just observe systems, they redesign them. Back in my apartment at Riverview Apartments, 600 miles from Cedar Ridge. Far enough to feel safe. Close enough to return quickly, I began building my trap. Not with anger, but with the cold precision of someone designing a circuit board. Every component had a purpose. Every connection had redundancy. The system took 3 weeks to perfect. Layer 1 battery-powered cameras, each the size of a button, with infrared capability and motion activation. I hid them inside smoke detector housings. I'd modified the LED that normally blinked green would record red when activated, but so faintly most people would mistake it for a power indicator. Layer 2, the network infrastructure, a mobile LTE router, smaller than a deck of cards, with its own SIM card registered to a shell company I'd created for North River testing purposes. The router would hide in my apartment's electrical panel, powered by a lithium battery pack good for 96 hours. Even if someone cut the main power and internet, the system would keep transmitting. Layer 3, the trigger mechanism. This was my masterpiece. Using North River's emergency protocol software, technically company property. But Marcus had given me admin access for development purposes. I programmed a cascading alert system. When the cameras detected multiple impact sounds above 80 decibels, combined with voice patterns matching distress frequencies, the feed would automatically push to 3 destinations: the Riverview Apartments security portal, the building's resident emergency app, and a cloud server that would archive everything in real time. I named the protocol Polaris in Dad's honor, the North Star that never lies. Testing happened at 2 a.m. when the building was quiet. I struck pillows, played recorded screams, simulated every possible scenario. The false positive rate had to be 0. I'd only get one chance. By the 4th week, Polaris could distinguish between a slammed door and a slap, between laughter and screams, between rough play and real violence. The software learned patterns like a predator, but in reverse, designed to catch rather than kill. The installation in my apartment took 6 hours. I positioned cameras in the smoke detectors, inside picture frames, behind the air conditioning vent. Each device synced to the hidden router, creating a mesh network that could lose half its nodes and still function. The final touch, a physical panic button under my kitchen table, disguised as a mounting bracket. That would force trigger the emergency broadcast regardless of other inputs. Then came the bait. I posted a photo on social media, Mom and me from years ago, before Wade, when our smiles were real. Location tag Denver. Caption, "Missing home lately. Thinking about family." Within an hour, Mom liked it. Wade didn't have social media, but he monitored hers. He'd see it. 2 days later, I posted another, a sunset from a hiking trail an hour from Cedar Ridge. No caption, just the location pin. Then I went dark, changed my status to taking a break from social media, turned off my phone's location services. Let my work colleagues know I'd be unreachable for a long weekend, dealing with personal matters. Created a void that would make Wade curious. But the masterstroke was the apartment building itself. I'd chosen Riverview specifically for its demographics: 30% elderly residents who never slept deeply, 40% young families with children, 20% security-conscious professionals, 10% night shift workers always awake at odd hours. The building's WhatsApp group had over 200 members. all paranoid about break-ins after a string of car thefts last year. When Polaris triggered, it wouldn't just alert security, it would light up every phone in the building. I scheduled everything for Friday night, Wade's drinking night, his vulnerable window, Thursday evening. I made one final test. I called Marcus from my landline, a number Wade couldn't trace to my cell. "If something happens to me," I said. "There's a backup drive in my desk. Bottom drawer, taped under the file folders. Password is Northstar77. It has everything." "Harper, what's going on?" "Insurance," I said. "Just insurance." Friday afternoon at 3. I drove to Cedar Ridge in a rental car. I parked 3 blocks from the house, walked the rest. The late September air was crisp, leaves beginning to turn the kind of day Dad would have taken us camping. I thought about him as I approached the house, wondered if he'd approve of what I was about to do. Knowledge is power. Harper. Yes, Dad. And sometimes power means letting someone think they have it all. I sat on my childhood porch at 4:45, knowing Wade would arrive at 5:45. 1 hour to wait, 1 hour to review 5 years of preparation. The cameras were armed. The network was live. The audience was unaware, but ready. At 5:20, I opened my laptop and initiated Polaris. A small window showed all systems green, all cameras recording, all broadcast protocols on standby. The red recording lights blinked so faintly you'd need to know exactly where to look. At 5:35, I heard his truck, that distinctive diesel rumble I'd learned to fear as a teenager. Now it sounded like prey approaching a trap. At 5:43, Wade Riker pulled into the driveway, saw me on his porch, and smiled. Not his public smile, but the private one, the smile of a man who thinks he's about to win a game, only he knows they're playing. He was wrong. The curtain was about to rise on a 5-hour performance, and Wade didn't even know he was on stage. Wade stood at my apartment door at 11:45 that night, swaying slightly, bourbon on his breath. The storm outside had knocked out the building's main power 10 minutes ago, perfect timing, like nature was complicit. Emergency lighting cast everything in submarine green, but the red dots of my cameras kept blinking, running on battery power he couldn't see. "Harper," he said, shouldering through the door I'd left deliberately unlocked. "We need to discuss your visit home." The first hour was almost gentle, if you didn't know better. He walked through my space, touching things, my books, my laptop, the photo of Dad I kept on the shelf. "You think you're smart," he said, words slightly slurred. "Coming home, giving your mother ideas. That shelter card, I found it." I stayed by the kitchen table, hand near the panic button but not on it. "Not yet. Let him talk." The cameras were recording everything, but I needed more than intimidation. I needed confession. "She won't leave," I said quietly. "You've made sure of that." He laughed, short and ugly. "Leave your mother can't microwave soup without permission. I built that. I own that. First admission coercive control." The software flagged it, but didn't trigger. Not enough decibels yet. Hour 2. His voice got louder. He'd found my work files, spreading them across the floor. "Security systems," he spat. "You think you're watching me? I've been tracking you for years. Every job application, every apartment lease. You can't hide from family." "Harper, is that what we are?" I asked. "Family." The backhand came fast, but sloppy alcohol making him predictable. I rolled with it, let myself fall against the counter. 87 decibels. Polaris woke up, started analyzing. The mesh network hummed invisibly, preparing. "You were nothing when I found you," he said, standing over me. "A sad little girl with a dead father and a useless mother. I gave you structure, discipline." "You gave us fear," I corrected, tasting blood from my split lip. That's when he grabbed my throat, hour 3, beginning with his hands cutting off my air. "Fear is respect," he growled. "Your mother learned that." "Should have taught you better." The impact when he threw me into the wall, 93 decibels. My scream frequency patterns matching severe distress. Polaris made its decision. Every camera switched to active streaming. The first notification hit the security desk downstairs. Then, the resident app started pinging 200 phones lighting up with Emergency Alert Unit 4B. Wade didn't notice. He was too focused on his performance, not realizing he'd become the show. I tried to be patient, he continued, pacing now, working himself up. 5 years, I waited, figured you'd fail out there, come crawling back. But you got proud, got ideas, just like your mother before I fixed her. How did you fix her? Wade. He smiled, that private smile from the driveway. Same way I'm fixing you. Break the parts that resist, rebuild them correct. Your mother took 3 months, 1 broken rib, 2 black eyes, and she learned to stop fighting. Full confession to domestic assault. The building's security feed was capturing everything in high definition. By now, the night security guard would be watching. The elderly couple next door would have their phones out. The young family downstairs would be calling 911. Hour 4 escalated. Wade found my kitchen knives, held one up to the light. You know what your problem is? You think you're different from her. But you're not. You're just meat and fear like everyone else. When he lunged, I dodged left, my shoulder separating as I hit the refrigerator. The automatic zoom on camera 3 captured his face perfectly, the rage, the tattoo on his neck reading Wade R. Every identifying feature the prosecution would need. The knife stuck in the drywall where my head had been. No one will believe you, he shouted, yanking the knife free. Crazy girl attacks her stepfather. He defends himself. Who's going to contradict me? That's when the fire alarm triggered my SOS button under the table, pressed with my knee when I fell. Not a real fire, but the connected alert system that would force everyone to check their emergency apps. 200 witnesses, all logging in simultaneously to see Wade Riker attempting murder in real time. Hour 5 was chaos. Wade, realizing sirens were approaching, grabbed me by the hair. You did something, he screamed. What did you do? I told the truth. I gasped. And everyone's watching. He froze, finally noticing the red lights, so many red lights. Each a witness he couldn't intimidate, couldn't control, couldn't erase. The door exploded inward at 12:52 in the morning, not just security, but residents Mr. Patterson from 4A with his baseball bat, the Martinez family from 3B, even Mrs. Chen from the first floor with her phone raised, adding her own recording to the evidence chain. Wade dropped me, his face cycling through confusion, rage. Then something I'd never seen before, fear, real fear, the kind he'd fed us for years, now choking him. They pinned him with zip tie restraints while we waited for police. He kept muttering, "No one will believe this," even as the building manager pulled up the archived feed on her tablet, showing him 5 hours of systematic assault, every word captured, every threat documented. The whole building's a witness, she told him. 400 eyes, Mr. Riker. That's who'll contradict you. The cameras kept recording as they dragged him out, Wade finally understanding what it meant to be watched, cataloged, controlled by a system he couldn't manipulate. The red lights blinked steadily, like mechanical heartbeats, like binary code spelling justice, like stars that never lie. The paramedics wanted to take me to the hospital, but I refused. My shoulder throbbed, my throat was bruised purple-black, but I had work to do. Evidence to preserve, a case to build that would be so airtight Wade would never breathe free air again. I sat in the building's security office at 2:15 in the morning, still in my torn clothes, blood dried on my face, directing the extraction of data like a conductor with a broken baton. The building manager, Sandra, had called in their IT specialist. Together, we pulled everything the raw feeds from each camera, the audio tracks isolated and enhanced, the metadata proving nothing had been edited. This is admissible, the IT specialist said, burning the 5th backup disk. Chain of custody maintained, digital signatures intact. This would hold up in any court. I signed each evidence bag, each disk, each printed frame showing Wade's face contorted with rage, his hands around my throat, the knife gleaming. My signature was shaky, but legible, Harper Quinn, victim and witness and architect of his destruction. The detective arrived at 3:30. Detective Lisa Reeves, 15 years in domestic violence cases, eyes that had seen too much but still held compassion. She watched 20 minutes of footage before stopping it. "This is the most comprehensive documentation of assault I've ever seen," she said. "He can't argue his way out of this." "That was the point," I said. I pulled out my laptop, showing her my additional insurance cloud backups uploading in real time to 3 separate servers, each with different jurisdictions. Even if he had destroyed the local copies, even if he'd burned the building down, the evidence would survive. "You planned this," she said, not an accusation, just observation. "I planned for survival," I corrected. "He planned the violence." We built the case together in that small office while the storm cleared outside. I provided the timeline, Wade's patterns of control, Mom's bruises, the years of psychological torture that preceded tonight's explosion. The detective cross-referenced with Cedar Ridge police reports 3 domestic disturbance calls over 2 years, all dismissed when Mom wouldn't press charges. "She was too scared," I explained. "He made sure of that." At 4:45, I called Mom on the burner phone I'd given her. She answered on the first ring she'd been awake, probably since Wade left for Murphy's and didn't come home. "Harper. The police just called. They said Wade. He's in custody. Mom, it's over. He confessed everything on camera. The whole building saw it." Silence. Then, sobbing, not sad tears, but the kind that come when you've been holding your breath for years and finally exhale. "Is it really over?" she whispered. "The dangerous part is. Now comes the legal part. Can you get to Denver today? Detective Reeves needs your statement." "Yes," she said, stronger. "Yes, I'll drive now." The district attorney's office opened at 8. By 8:30, they'd reviewed the footage. By 9, they'd filed charges: attempted murder, aggravated assault, criminal threatening, stalking across state lines, false imprisonment, and 6 counts of domestic violence based on his recorded confessions about Mom. "We're also adding interstate stalking," the ADA said. "A young woman named Claire who looked like she ate men like Wade for breakfast. You said he tracked your employment." I handed her the folder I'd prepared screenshots of background checks he'd run. Private investigator reports with his name as the client. Even a credit inquiry he'd made illegally using Mom's information to find my addresses. "He built a paper trail of his own obsession," Claire said, almost admiringly. "Predators usually aren't this stupid." "He wasn't stupid," I said. "He was arrogant. He believed his control was perfect, that no one would ever fight back with his own weapons." The forensic team found more at his house journals where he'd documented his training methods for Mom, photos of my apartment building from his reconnaissance trips, even a manila folder labeled Harper Contingencies with plans for what he'd do if I became a problem. But the crown jewel of evidence came from Wade himself. In his truck, police found a voice recorder where he'd been practicing his speech for tonight, what he planned to say to me, how he'd break me down. He'd recorded over 40 versions, refining his threats, perfecting his violence like a script. "He rehearsed hurting you," Detective Reeves said, disgust clear in her voice. By noon, Mom arrived at the Denver police station. She looked different, still thin, still fragile, but standing straighter. She brought something with her, a safety deposit box key I didn't know existed. "Your father opened this before he died," she said. "Made me promise to give it to you when you were strong enough to use it." I think that's now. Inside the box, $10,000 cash and a letter in Dad's handwriting. "Harper, if you're reading this, something's gone wrong and I'm not there to protect you. Use this to protect yourself and your mother. Be the North Star, baby. Guide her home." Mom saw my tears, pulled me close. "You did it," she said. "You guided us both home." The final piece of the trap snapped shut when Claire called at 4 that afternoon. Wade's lawyer just saw the full evidence package. They're not even trying for a plea deal. He knows he's finished. I thought about Wade in his cell, feeling walls close in, experiencing the helplessness he'd inflicted for years. He'd said the world was small. He was right. It had shrunk to the size of a cage, and he'd locked himself inside with his own arrogance. The interrogation room at the Denver County Jail had one-way glass, but I stood on the other side watching Wade shrink into himself as ADA Claire hit play on the 5-hour recording. His lawyer, an overworked public defender, had already advised him to remain silent, but Wade couldn't help himself. Control freaks never can when they see their power evaporating. "That's not what it looks like," he started, then stopped as his own voice filled the room. "Your mother took 3 months, 1 broken rib, 2 black eyes, and she learned to stop fighting." Claire paused the recording. "Mr. Riker, that's a confession to aggravated assault. Would you like to explain what it actually looks like?" Wade's jaw worked silently. On screen, the video showed him throwing me into the wall, his face perfectly lit by my hidden cameras. That tattoo, Wade R., clear as a signature. "She set me up," he finally said. "She set up your hands around her throat?" Claire asked, fast-forwarding to that moment. "She set up your confession about tracking her across state lines. She set up the knife you pulled from her kitchen drawer." The timestamp in the corner read 11:45 through 12:52, 1 hour and 7 minutes of systematic violence. Every second documented. But the moment that broke him wasn't the violence. It was when Claire pulled up the building's resident app, showing the real-time comments from 200 witnesses. "Someone help her. I'm calling 911. 4th floor, we're coming now. He's going to kill her." 243 witnesses. "Mr. Riker," Claire said, "not just watching a recording, but watching it happen live. They saw you. They heard you. They saved her." Wade's lawyer leaned in, whispered something. Wade shook his head, then looked directly at the mirror, knowing I was behind it. "You think you won," he said to his reflection. Claire stood, gathering her files. "She didn't win anything, Mr. Riker. She survived. You're the one who lost your control, lost your freedom, lost everything you spent years building, and you did it to yourself, live on camera." The trial would take months, but the outcome was certain. Wade's lawyer tried to argue entrapment, but the judge shut it down. The defendant chose to break into Ms. Quinn's apartment. He chose violence. That Ms. Quinn was prepared for these choices doesn't diminish his culpability. They played clips in court. Wade's voice echoing through speakers, describing his methods, his philosophy of control through fear. Mom testified, finally free to speak without his shadow over her. She described the years of imprisonment disguised as marriage, the bruises hidden under makeup, the savings account he'd drained, the friends he'd driven away. "He made me disappear," she said, piece by piece, until I was just an extension of his will. The jury deliberated for 2 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge, a woman who'd seen too many Wade Rikers in her courtroom, gave him the maximum 25 years, no possibility of parole for 15. As they led Wade away, he turned to look at me one last time. That private smile tried to surface, that smirk of superiority, but it crumbled. He finally understood what I'd learned at North River. The best surveillance systems are invisible until they activate, and by then, it's too late to run. Mom moved to Denver, into an apartment 3 blocks from mine. She got a job at the public library, started therapy, began existing as her own person for the first time in 8 years. Sometimes I'd catch her standing at windows, staring out like she couldn't believe she could leave whenever she wanted. "The door locks from the inside now," she'd say, amazed by this simple freedom. Marcus promoted me to senior systems designer at North River. My experience became a case study in emergency response protocols, though we kept the personal details confidential. I trained new installers on the Polaris system, teaching them that cameras weren't just about watching, they were about witness, evidence, truth that couldn't be erased or denied. 6 months after Wade's sentencing, Mom and I went camping where Dad used to take us. We built a fire, traced constellations, found Polaris shining steady in the northern sky. Your father would be proud, Mom said. He told me to be the North Star, I replied, to guide you home. You did more than that, she said. You lit up the whole damn sky. Wade was right about one thing: the world is small. Small enough that evil can't hide when 200 strangers become witnesses, when technology becomes justice, when a girl with her father's star charts and her mother's quiet strength decides that fear isn't stronger than truth. The cameras in my apartment are gone now, packed away with other evidence in some courthouse basement, but I kept the smoke detector from the kitchen, the one that caught Wade's confession perfectly. It sits on my shelf, unpowered, its red light dark, a reminder that sometimes, to catch a predator, you have to let them think they've already won, a reminder that the world may be small, but it's full of witnesses, a reminder that some cages you build yourself. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Your experiences and perspectives make this community stronger. Until next time, stay safe and keep watching out for each other.